Welcome to the video of how to use Curvalicious to make an exciting and interesting border. My name is Cheryl Lynch and Curvalicious is my baby. If you have seen my demo at quilt shows, you have heard me talk about this technique. Now I'm here to show you. Instead of just a plain border, it doesn't take that much longer to add a dynamic and interesting border, just like some of those quilts that are winning big prizes at the quilt shows. It makes quilts very elegant indeed. So we're going to start with just this plain piece of fabric. It's a cute house fabric print, and we're going to pretend that that's my quilt. So imagine that you would just put on a plain border. So here I've pinned a plain border to my design wall. It's a 3.5 inch wide strip of the aqua fabric, and I've added 2 cornerstones, and they've all picked up the colors from the quilt. And it looks cute, and you can do some fun quilting in the border. But let's see what happens if you add some Curvalicious to the inner border. So the first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to cut the Curvalicious strips. Now I'm ready to prepare the Curvalicious inner borders. To do that, I start with a 4-inch strip of the fabric I'm going to use for my inner border. Now I'm using a solid here, but if this was a print, I'm going to fold it in half, wrong side up now, so fold it in half, press the crease, and I'm going to place the wrong side up. And then I'm going to take my fusible web, fold it in half, and now I have the fusible web on the back side, and I'm going to nest that right into that fold and press that down. Now I'm using a 2-inch piece of fusible web and a 4-inch strip of border, and this is a little refinement I've come up with so that you don't have the fusible in the entire border, only really it's on the edge. So I'm going to take that, and when you press it down, you end up with a piece that looks like this. Now, everything we've done with Curvalicious, it's all about symmetry. So we're going to take this and we're going to fold it in half because we want this border to be symmetrical. Okay? Then we're going to take our Curvalicious ruler, and I can see where that crease is. And we want to make sure that that crease is equally divided on both sides of the Curvalicious. So on the hill and on the valley. So we're going to straddle it with our tool against the edge and take our take our rotary cutter, and we're going to cut along the Curvalicious. And when we're done with that, we remove the paper and we end up with 2 inner borders. Oh, I got a little bit of paper left that look like this, with the fusible pretty much just on, this is maybe like 1 inch of the edge. And that's what we're going to use to fuse to the border, the turquoise border that we have. Now, I should have mentioned that you should match the middle of both of the borders, because again, you want that border symmetrical. So you fold the teal border in half, find the middle, fold the Curvalicious inner border in half, and match the middles before you iron the Curvalicious border down. Now after this, you would do a blanket stitch on your machine. I'm not going to stitch it right now. I just want to get this up on the design wall to show you what it would look like. So here's what the Curvalicious border looks like with cornerstones. So I haven't mitered my corners. I've just worked out from the center of each side and worked so that the corners looked similar. You'll always be able to get the 2 sides the same because you're working from the center out, and the top and the bottom the same, but sometimes you'll have to make a little bit of adjustment so that in the cornerstones they look similar. And you might have to do that by moving it over a bit or adding an inner border or taking away an inner border. So the other adjustment you could make or addition you could make that really makes it very cute is you can add your circles with your tool. So let's see what it looks like when I add some circles. So there are just some circles I had hanging around that I pinned to the border. I would use a Curvalicious tool to place them. And it depends on how wide that inner Curvalicious border is, how much of the circle would be showing. If it was a thinner border, you might just get a half of a circle. But for sure, stitch the circles to the border before you add the border to the body of the quilt. You'll catch it in the seam and it'll be much easier to stitch around the circles when you're just working with the border. Okay, so that's if we use cornerstones. But what if we decide we want to miter the borders? So that is a little bit more difficult. And when I do a mitered border, I cut that, let's call it a compound border with the Curvalicious with the background border. I cut the compound border about 10 inches longer than the body of the quilt. So let's see how I can show you how to do the corners. I've taken my 2 strips and I've pinned them to my design wall using the valley of the Curvalicious strip, and I matched the valley with the middle of the edge of my border. Don't worry, it's washable marker. I can wash that out because I love this fabric too much and I'm going to use it again. So I'm going to mark the middle of the top and the middle of the side. So I've lined those up and I've pinned the borders to my design wall. Now, you would not be doing this on the design wall, but you would be doing this first on your sewing machine, stitch along 1/4 inch seam allowance, and stop on both sides within a 1/4 inch of the corner. Then, take it to your ironing board. It's much easier on the ironing board than it is on my design wall. So to get the mitered corner, and this is how I do all my mitered corners, I leave one side flat, and then I take the other side and I fold it up into a 45-degree angle. I know it's a 45-degree angle when I overlap the border I'm folding with the border beneath it. And I press that. Now, if it's off a little bit, like this one's off a little bit, I have the power to adjust it a tiny bit because I'm going to iron it. So there's a little bit better. I like that one much better. It's all lined up. It makes a nice smooth curve going around that corner. So what I'll do is I'll iron it down, and then I'll pin underneath, open it up, and then stitch on that iron crease line from the outside corner down into where those 2 pieces meet at 1/4 inch from the seam allowance. And that gives me one of the rounded corners. I also have the option of matching any part of the Curvalicious curve to the middle of each side of the quilt. I just have to be consistent in what part of the curve I'm matching. And it doesn't have to be the same, the sides and the top, but the 2 sides have to be the same and the top and the bottom need to be the same. So let's see what happens instead of using the valley at the middle of each of the sides. Let's see what happens if I use the peak at the middle of the sides. Let's see what design we get in the corner. Okay, so now I've aligned the peak of the Curvalicious border with the middle of the quilt, along the top and along the side. And let's see what happens to the corner here as I fold the top border back 45 degrees. So fold it back, align it up, align the sides. I'm going to fix it a little bit so it's better to my liking. And I just want to make sure it's as close to 90 degrees as I can get, 45 degrees as I can get it, but matching. And there you end up with this peak, like a little cat's eye glass. So that's how you can change your corners, and you would end up with that corner on each of the 4 corners, providing you have to make sure that you work from the middle out and all your corners will be the same. So I hope you can see how much fun you can have doing Curvalicious Borders on your quilt. It just will take you a little bit longer and you will have a dynamite fun border onto your quilt. And instead of just slapping a border on, your border will add to your quilt. Thanks for stopping by.